Well, I would like to thank you all for coming tonight. We are going to start out our normal board meeting with a presentation on our possible referendum, and we will open the floor up for questions after the presentation. It's on all of the screens. If you'd like to move to see any of the screens, feel free to do so. This is an open meeting. You can come and go as you please. I encourage you to stay for the whole thing. But I would like to turn the floor over to our new superintendent, Dr. Don White, who will be speaking from the podium.
Great. Thank you very much, and thank you for everyone for coming out this evening. A couple housekeeping notes. There were cards over on the table. If you're not comfortable asking questions tonight, but you'd like something answered, please write the question down. If you don't put any contact information, it's possible it'll just go on our frequently asked questions list. But if you would like me to contact you after the meeting, please put your contact information. I'll be happy to do that so we can carry on a conversation. And that's what this is intended to be. The board has an intent of listening to the community, and you'll see that throughout this. We're trying to gather as much information as we can and hear from the community, because it's really a community question. So I'm going to start with some good news. The good news is we don't have to build a building. We have the facilities that we need to handle the students that we see now and are projecting to see. We just need to maintain the buildings that we have. That's the key. So you can see on the screen our enrollment history. The district has declined in enrollment over the past several years. It's stabilized now, and it's projected to stay about where we are. It might tick back up a little bit, but it's not enough to cause us to need another school. And we also know that there aren't enough home sites within our district to have an influx of new students that would cause that too. So the good news is we can just maintain our current schools. And so that's what this is about, is a plan to do that. Back in June of 2018, the district asked McKinstry to develop the facility condition assessment report. And McKinstry came back. This is just a snapshot of this. At a high level, they identified 5 areas that we need to focus on inside of all of our facilities. And I'll go into a little bit more detail in just a second. It's admittedly a high-level assessment. It needs more details. And so we're going through the process. In fact, we just interviewed 5 firms today to select a new architect. And the new architect will join us with McKinstry plan being the base of our conversation. And then we will build upon that with more details. So much more to come, but we're excited about the direction we're going. A little bit of the images, if you don't mind. This is what we're seeing at our schools. I brought up MJ first, the junior high school first. I've heard in the community that's our new school. It's 20 years old now. So it's our newest school, but it's time to put some TLC into that building. So you can see the parking lot needs some attention, some of our grounds. I just learned this one the other day. The track picture you can see, the track is splitting apart a little bit, so we've got some repairs that need to go on there. So we've got some work at the junior high also. Here's some pictures of both MIS and the elementary school. The left-hand picture where it says sinkhole, we actually had a sinkhole out here in the south end where the students play in some of our playground area. So that needs to be repaired, and other areas around our parking lot. We have an image up here called catastrophic failure. And what had happened one day, a side note here, I was in my office really early and the maintenance person came in and said, "You want to go on a field trip?" And I said, "Sure, I'd love to go on a field trip." Little did I know, in a suit, he's dragging me up on top of the roof. And he took me and I took this picture. What had happened is it's an HVAC unit on top of the roof. They had repaired part of it, got it operational. Another piece broke down, got that operational, till eventually it just imploded. It was too much for it to bear. So we've got major systems that are failing us now. I'm just glad no one was up on the roof for that to happen, because it could have been very harmful for someone. You can see the roof needs, the elementary school in the bottom right corner. We have some leaks in all 3 of our buildings. That's normal. That's absolutely normal for schools. When you have flat roofs that are this large, that's not abnormal. So I don't want you thinking that we're the only district that has this kind of thing. But it is something we need to address. The thing I will qualify all of my comments, and I should have started with this. Our buildings are safe. They're environmentally safe for our kids. There's nothing that I would be concerned about sending my own children to or my grandchildren to a school here. That's not the issue. The issue is how can we maintain them now and moving into the future, but they are safe. Here's a picture of some controls at MIS, and you can see this was a 1971 system when the school was built. These are original controls. And it looks impressive in the bottom left corner, but they are 1971 controls, so it's time to do something with these. We have some fraying wires in the upper left-hand corner that need to be addressed, and the right-hand picture is a little blurry. There was a pump that I guess leaked, and it corroded. You can't see it too well, but it corroded the controls, so that's another area that we need to take care of. And then the last one of pictures, this is that same unit, and you can see if it's clear at least. And by the way, we're posting this, so you can download this and see it up close if you care to see it. But the wires here are really past their prime, and it's time to actually do the whole thing and make sure that the controls are working. So again, a 1971 control unit that served the district extremely well. But it, just like our homes, eventually you have to replace the roof, eventually the heater, eventually the water heater, all those things. That's just what we have to do, the same thing. A little bit more in details, McKinstry broke this into what they call near-term, I think it's mid-term and then long-term. We'll see some slides here in a second. I've read all these, and again, you can download this and see it. But these near-term projects are supposed to be done within 5 years. I would argue we have an immediate need on several of these, and let me tell you you may not be able to see this slide well, but let me tell you what I mean. The one that's highlighted is HVAC and controls at MIS. We're having that immediate need right now. You can tell by the temperature in this room, it's difficult to control the temperature. It's time that we address that. This next one, in all buildings, facility condition assessment. As I said, we need to give our architect time to actually come in and do an assessment, a more detailed assessment. We have ranges over on the right-hand side of this slide. You can see ranges and estimates of costs. We need to narrow in on this. It's a wide range. And I understand why they had to do a wide range. There are too many conditions that are unknown until you get in and actually dig into the project. So we need to do that. The next one is concrete walkways, repairs and replace walkways. In all three of our buildings, we have areas that need that. In all three of our buildings, we need to upgrade the parking lots. That's the next one. These are what I consider to be current needs, not within the next 5 years. HVAC and controls at MES, that's where we're sitting right now. The roof repairs, I showed you a couple pictures of what we're talking about there. Restroom updates, there are needs for its time. They're original in their scope, so we need to address those. Window upgrades, we have some inefficient windows, so it's time to look at that and see what we need to do to bring more efficiency. The track I showed you a picture of, that's the one that was just highlighted at the junior high. And then the last one I'll highlight is exterior sealants or facade repair. That's tuck pointing and all those kinds of things that need to be addressed. You can see the range. I said that the range is extreme. The reason that the range is extreme, again, because they don't have all the details. We need to get more experts in and do that assessment so that we can get all the details together. Then they put together, and I won't highlight all the details, they put together the medium-term projects between 6 and 10 years. And again, if you download this, you'll be able to see it. And then the long-term projects between 11 and 20 years. And there were several there. And the long-term ones range between 11.5 and about 21 million. So how do we go about doing this? Now we start moving into the financial picture here. Just like our homes, eventually we pay off schools too. The good news is that the junior high will be paid off in 2 years. So it's about 20, it was 20 years, the bonds. So that'll be paid off in 2020. And so if the board chooses to go to referendum, they can maintain this current rate of what is being paid right now for homeowners. So it's not asking for an increase. It's just maintaining this and moving that rate to new projects. That's what this is all about. It's about 30 cents that is going to the debt of the junior high that will be paid off. That'll be paid off in 2020. If the board chooses to go April 2nd, they'll have an opportunity to keep the tax rate stable. In all transparency, if the board decides not to go or it doesn't pass, the tax rate will decrease by 30 cents, approximately 30 cents, somewhere in that range. So that's why this is an important question for our community. Maintain the tax rate or in the future deal with this issue. The board has basically 4 funding options that they can consider. They can use current fund balances, and I'll talk about that a little more in detail in a second. There's something called a DSEB, or a debt service extension base. Those two, the first two, have been somewhat ruled out as options. Just doesn't seem feasible for our condition where we're at in our situation. There are 2, though, that the board can consider, or is still, I would say, seriously considering. A limiting rate increase and then a bond sale. In a high-level discussion, a couple points on this. The limiting rate increase would be take the 30 cents that's coming off on the junior high and move it to the limiting rate. That would be an indefinite limiting rate. I've been asked, why do we have to call it a limiting rate increase? It's because right now our limiting rate is here, and when you take the bonds off, you increase that by 30 cents, so it's literally an increase on that limiting rate. That's why it's called limiting rate increase. That's the technical term of it. And I want to make sure during all of these kinds of community forums that we're using the right terms so that you're not surprised by something later. The good news on limiting rate, 100% of the proceeds stays local. The bond sale, just like our homes, when you buy a house and you need to mortgage it, you have interest that you have to pay. Our current estimates are that if you want to have a project that's $15 million, those projects, you would pay $8 million to the banks in interest. So that's the difference between the two. That $8 million is not for projects inside of our district then. That's the difference. The other thing is, the district could pace their projects with the limiting rate. With the bond sale, there's a limited time that you can sell the bonds and complete your projects. So you're looking at about a 7 to 10 year project range in the bond sale, and that wouldn't complete all the projects that we know we have. And so we would have to come back to the community at a future date and ask to sell more bonds or do something different at that point. So that's what the board is struggling with, and that's where eventually we're going to ask for your input. So a little bit about our revenue. And this gets to using the current fund balances. The district levies every year an amount per fund. And it's not like our home environment where in a savings account, if you run short in your checking account, you can move it over to your savings, just do that, or from checking to savings. When the levy is approved, we need to move those dollars to that fund, and it's only spent on things out of that fund. There are some exceptions. You can move money around, but it's not as easy as our personal lives where you just move money around. So we have, Terry, I'm going to put you on the spot, approximately 12 million? Approximately 12 million in reserves, in fund balances. So those are divvied up between all of the funds. It's not one fund. The education fund is the most, but it's divvied up around all the funds, and you can't just pull it out for projects like this. The other thing is, and I think I compliment this board and previous boards in this district, the fiscal responsibility. They've always tried to plan for the future as best they could. They couldn't always do everything right, but they've done really good work here. There are things that are going to be coming from the state. We all know the state's in a financial crisis right now. We're starting to see signs that they're going to start pushing things back to us in expenses and have us cover it. Pension cost shift, possible property tax freeze. These are things that are gaining momentum. We don't know if or when, but we know something will happen. And to the credit of the board, they're trying to look out for the community to say, let's start preparing for those. You could use fund balances for those things until you can right the ship and get that resolved, whatever they're going to pass back to us. So we're preparing for that. That's why we don't want to use fund balances. There are many reasons there. On the revenue side, this slide is, if you look at the top pie chart, this slide demonstrates we get about 88% of our revenue comes from local taxpayers, property taxes. At the state average, it's 68% for the state. So you can see we are heavily reliant on property taxes. That's the way the system works. I wish it wasn't that way, but that's the way we need to fund our schools. So it's important that we have this conversation. Back to the fiscal responsibility. The district right now has the lowest tax rate of all of what we call our comparable schools. And you can see on the screen the range over on the right-hand side, and the district has maintained that over several years. Right now, we're at $2.89. The next highest is Will County, 92. They're at $3.15, and it goes all the way up to $4.33. So you can see the tax rates and how that applies to our local community. This rate would not increase as a result of what we're talking about tonight, at least, the 30 cents. That would maintain, is what we're saying. We're not asking to raise that up or move up in average. We're just asking to maintain this rate. How do we spend our money then? That's always a good question. And so we have this thing we call operating expense per pupil, and you can see that we are second from the lowest in what we spend on our operating expenses per pupil. It's what I would consider to be an efficient operation. The state also has comparisons that they put together, and this is a statewide average. You can see instructional spending per pupil. We're at $5,800, and the average is $8,000. So you can see when you compare us across the state, we compare favorably. And then the operating spending per pupil at the state level, you can see that we are about $2,000, give or take, under the state average. So we compare, again, favorably to the state's average schools. They approved recently a new evidence-based funding model, which they have 33, I think it's 33 indicators now, where they look at those 33 indicators and they determined you need this much funding to provide an adequate education for your students, an adequate education, not the exemplary education, an adequate education. So they did all the math, and we are at 98% of adequacy. That means we're just under the combined state and local, combine all of our revenue together, we're at 98% of our adequacy. But then they break it out and they say at the local level, how much should you be contributing? And we're at 82% of the adequacy. Their argument, meaning the state's argument, would be that we should be contributing more at the local level. We're not asking to do that. We're asking to maintain, is really what we're doing. So we're not asking to increase this. So now it's the next steps. I already talked about the architect selection. We hope to go to the board in December with a recommendation to the board. I have in here that we're doing a community research phone survey, and that's FACO is doing that. I have dates the 15th through the 22nd. It's actually going to be moved until next week or at
26th through 30th.
So starting the 26th, and it'll go approximately a week. So we just moved that back a little bit. We're still finalizing a question or two. So this date will be updated. So it's the 26th that'll start. It's a phone. So if you get a phone call and it says FACO, please answer the phone. I know we never answer our phones anymore, but that would be very helpful. We really want the input from our community. We have additional community forums already scheduled, and we can schedule more. We can come to groups. If there are groups that would love to hear this story, be happy to schedule that. You just need to contact my office and we can help. And then the board has to make a decision by January 14th of 2019. So now we're going to engage and ask you. Here are some questions we have on our mind, and you might have some. Should the board place this on the ballot for April 2nd? That's one of our questions based on what you've learned tonight. If you're not certain, what questions or answers or what more information do you need? That would help us. And then if you believe this is appropriate, do you have an opinion on the limiting rate versus the bond rate? And then any other questions you have. And two last statements before I open it up. I'm going to facilitate this. So when you ask the question, I'll probably repeat it. I forgot to say we are streaming live on Facebook right now. So hopefully some people are watching us, and this will be available later also. So we have a new email address if you want to, just specific to this, superintendent@mokena159.org. Send your questions, and I'll do my best to try to get back to you with answers. So with that said, Mr. President, I will open it up to you first if you have any comments, or the board does, and then we can take questions.
I would just encourage anyone present, either today or at future community forums, to please, this is a friendly environment. The school board, and I hope to speak for all 7 of us, want to hear your feedback, whether that's positive or negative. We want to address your concerns, and we want to hear your hopes and dreams for our kids. We're trying to provide a conducive environment for our teachers to teach and our students to learn. And we have to continue to do this to maintain our buildings. So we welcome all feedback. So
Great.
The floor is yours.
With that said, questions or thoughts or comments? Yes, sir.
Excuse me. You keep mentioning the 30 cents, and then you showed a graph of the $2.83. Explain how that actually works. 30 cents of what?
Yes.
289 of what? Does that make sense for me?
Yes, right. So the question is, describe 289 of what? So I'm using $2.89. How does that apply to my local house, right?
Exactly.
Right. So it's if you look at your assessed value, divide it by a third, and then that's our rate that's applied to that third, minus any exemptions you have and all that kind of stuff. Terry,
Yep.
fair?
Yes.
Okay. And so that 289 is the rate that's applied to your home value. Take the same exact home, same exact value to another community, and they would apply 315 or 383 to that equalized assessed value is what it is. That's what the rate is then. So when you look on your tax bill, and we're saying the 30 cents is in that 289 right now. So if this were not to move forward or it wasn't passed, it would go down to approximately 259. There are other factors that control this 289 than just this discussion. Inflation controls it a little bit. There's some other factors, but it's going to be in this range. Does that help? Okay. Other questions? Yes, sir.
Are you levying at the 5% now, the max, Terry?
Levying at the 5%.
Oh, this is Will County, right?
Yes, it's Will County.
So you're not tax cap, or?
We are.
Yes,
taxing
okay.
it.
So tonight your levy is 5% greater, and then CPI was 2.1,
The
right?
CPI was 2.1.
So are you retiring debt now for the 30 cents?
Yes, we're retiring
Retiring
debt
debt.
for the 30 cents. So I'm going to repeat your question because I think I understand what it is.
Right.
The question is, are we levying basically to our maximum amount that we can?
And you always have that.
Yes, I believe the district has a history of levying the amount that's allowed by law, which is included to be the CPI
Yes.
plus new construction. So yes, I believe the district has a history of doing that. So, board members, do you have the same understanding? I know you've been around 4
Forever,
years.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But in recent history, yes.
So
Yes.
you're retiring 30 cents, so with an additional 30 cents, also you're going to retire, and just by keeping it that rate, you can still do all these
It's
projects?
289 right now, and if no
can I
other
just say
conditions,
something?
we stay at
So I
289.
live out here, obviously. I do work in a school district in the south suburbs. I used to be a business manager. I'm a superintendent now. It's such a low tax. I can't believe you guys even keep the doors open. And as a homeowner, and I do our own tax levy now, so I don't know what an additional 30 cents on top of the 289 would be per home, but it couldn't be much more than a couple $100 a year.
Terry, could you give us
I can answer it.
Yes.
Yeah, I can. I'm sitting over here waiting to answer.
Sure.
Yeah.
So when we retire that debt, that 30 cent goes away. Like we said, it goes down to 259, which where we're at now.
Terrible.
Right, totally agree. And so it's a matter of keeping it the same so the 30 cents replaces the other 30 cents because that junior high is paid off. And so the average house that we've used is a $300,000 house in this area, and it's easy math, divided by 3 to get your EAV, so 100,000. You apply that 30 cents on the 100,000, and that's it. It's $25 a quarter, right? $25 a month, $100 a quarter, $300 a year.
And with the new evidence-based funding, we receive no extra money?
We did. We received about 31,000 extra. We're tier 3, and so we got a little bit extra.
And I think that's so I work in a very low-income school district. With the new evidence-based formula, my school district received $1.8 million
Nice.
of additional money.
So tier
But,
one.
which is great for me, but to live out here and to see how the disparity for Mokena's kind of this not wealthy community, but the middle of the road, and they're treated the worst out of all the school districts in Illinois, because you have to rely on property taxes. And with the tax rate that low, again, I commend the board for just being able to do what you all do here, because, I mean, my tax rate's double this. And it's, I think it's very important to have quality schools and quality mechanical. I was with Dr. last year at many track meets, and I think the world of him, and he's pointed out many things that the school district needs to work on. And I really hope that this passes.
I'll just point out that, again, the 289, we're trying to take care of our needs. So if we can maintain at that level, we believe that we'll have the revenue we need to maintain a healthy learning environment for our students.
Sure.
Thank you.
Other, yes, sir.
It's more for the board, and maybe I'm getting this completely wrong, but recently they voted against the 1% sales tax increase, which if for people down here, a certain percentage of Will County schools passed it, we go referendum and then pass referendum. All the extra sales tax would be distributed to the Will County schools based on enrollment. Mokena would have got $700,000, and that money would have been used solely on capital expenditure projects. I'm just wondering why the board sort of rejected that when they knew potentially that we have all these years in the future.
I can speak to that. I can speak why I voted that down. That vote was unanimous, as I recall, all 7 of us. And as it came down to it, it turned out that Mokena, with our little enrollment, was the deciding factor. So the spotlight was somewhat upon us. I personally voted that 1% sales tax down. It was not a well thought out tax proposition. But primarily I voted it down because the amount of sales tax that Mokena generates would not go directly to Mokena schools. It would be dispersed throughout schools in Will County. And I personally felt as though it was more important for our taxpayers to pay for our schools, given our tax rate, than it would be to improve other schools that are in Will County.
I'll just add one more thing to that. That you hit it on the head. That was a 2-part process.
Right.
So the first part was just to get the school 50% of the school districts to pass it. Then that had to go to every city in Will County or town, and would have to approve it on top of that. Right. So I mean, if a district or a big city like Joliet, Plainfield, in Will County went against it, it wouldn't have mattered. So just because we voted to pass it doesn't mean that was a sure thing that it was going to pass. So we could have said, yes, let's go for that. And then if the residents of Will County voted it down and we were counting on that money to do some of these projects, we would have been in a hole because we wouldn't have had any funding to do those. And one more thing, sorry. Just because we voted no at the moment doesn't mean that the school districts in Will County can't bring this back up. We had presentations all throughout the process that we were evaluating it, that this is a phenomena that has happened in several counties in Illinois with varying degrees of success rates. And there's not a single Collier County of Cook County that has passed it to date. To date, it's all been central and southern western counties in Illinois that have passed it. So it's not to say dead, but I think the board, if I can speak for it, we thought that we had a better opportunity to get the funding we needed potentially by going down this route.
Thank you for that question.
Great question. Very good question. Other questions or comments? Yes.
So the money that you're gonna get for this, how long will this maintain the school district? Or are you gonna come back in 5 to 10 years to ask for another referendum?
That's the struggle of the bonds versus the limiting rate. The limiting rate would provide the revenue. assuming the district continued to contribute to that, to the operations, the buildings, if you will. So that continues indefinitely, that 30 cents for the limiting rate. The bonds, the district would have to come back and ask again, because it wouldn't generate enough revenue. And then you would typically pay those bonds off over 20 years. And so we would still come back within 20 years and need more additional revenue or sale of bonds to continue projects into the future. And Board Member Bush says it really well. We know what our cycle is for, let's call it 15 years. You can almost take that and just repeat it in the next 15 years and the next 15 and just keep going forever. That's why this is an opportunity for the community. It's a great question.
Again, and just full disclosure, I also work in the school district. I live in Mokena, and I work in my school district in the south suburbs also. But the 30 cents, what does that get the district on a yearly basis then? And is that enough money to fund the project? Because it seems like there are projects in that 5 to 10 year range that need to be taken care of. So is that enough? And has the analysis been done if that's enough, or does it need to be 40 cents? So again, I'll go back to the questions back there, and so that you don't have to come back again, to do that. So that.
Terry, do you want to speak to the amount that is generating? I believe I know it, but I'll give you the expert the floor.
Sure. So the 30 seconds is going to be based off of our EAV. In our EAV, I'm going to do easy math. Say it's $500 million. So when you apply a penny to it, for every penny, you're getting 50,000. So you've got 50,000 times 30. So we're going to generate about 1.5 million a year. So 1.5 million a year, when we take a look at those projects, we plan those projects out, and we take care of those on an annual basis. We believe, we've presented to the board, that the 1.5 million should be able to take care of the projects that the school needs for repairs, maintenance, and updates.
There will be years when we have to save the money for the following year to bring, so an HVAC is an example. Maybe even 3 years you'll have to pool that money to take care of a project, but we believe it's enough to take care of the future.
Sometimes it's wise, sometimes as you look ahead, to maybe look at 35 cents instead of 30, because there are going to be those times that there are going to be a big project that is there that you're going to want to cover, and so it doesn't shut down the place. And I trust the board. I'm speaking from experience right now. That just happened a week ago. One of our schools, that the well pump went out, and we had to shut down the school for a week and move the kids to another school. So I just think to look at that. I'm not saying I encourage that, but again, I think it's just something to look at. I would rather have the more money there, so you don't have to come back and then say, we may need some more.
Yeah. Terry?
I think the premise of the conversation was maintain at the 2.89, was just having that unique opportunity to maintain without having any increase in tax rate. It was about maintaining.
There was real quick, there was a question over there.
It's a follow-up to this conversation. I'm trying to understand the difference between the bond and the limiting rate option. If both of them would give you the opportunity to come back, I'm grappling with which one is better and which one has, the first option just seemed to be overlooked, and then going to limiting rate. How is that better, and how are we as homeowners protected from raises from down the road?
From the future?
I don't want to speak for Terry or for Dr. Lloyd either, but what happens is on bonds, we have to pay interest on that. And so if I want to take out $15 million in principal, I have to pay $8 million in interest. It's actually going to cost us more. Whereas the limiting rate, you can put all that money, all that is principal, and you're not paying any interest on it. And it's going all to your project. So it's saving money.
But
It doesn't mean that you can't come back and ask for additional money.
Correct. I want to be transparent on your point there, that the district in the future, it doesn't exclude them from coming back and having this conversation again. It's just, we're hopeful that it doesn't for this reason. Yes,
So
sir.
Terry, with your debt extension, could you just do a backdoor referendum to get
Well,
to
we
that
could.
price? And then, right?
We could with the DSEB. So part of why our all-in, if you look at the PMA presentation, you see that the debt service base, the debt service for this year is 0.39. And so we still have 0.09 left on there because we did some bonds in 2016 to do the HVAC system here, but it didn't include this room.
Okay.
So, but it included a lot of classrooms. So you take care of kids first, right? So they took care of kids first. That's the board had to do, so they chose to take care of kids first. So there's still 9 cents on there, and that 9 cents is actually maxes out your DSEP for the next 18 years. So one of the options we took a look at was increasing the DSEP to the borrowing capacity, right? And so then with increasing the DSEP meant then you're issuing bonds or you're utilizing working cash, doing the backdoor referendum, and it's when we took a look at how complicated each of those concepts were, the bond is a simpler concept. It's brick and mortar. It's like a mortgage on your house. That has probably the highest success because it's easiest to understand. The limiting rate saves you all that interest money. It's continuous revenue. It does allow you to use different funds if you need to put it in a different fund rather than just in capital projects because it's an all-in limiting rate. The DSEB is just a little more complicated to try to explain that it's your debt service extension base. It's about your borrowing capacity. You actually issue bonds for either a 3-year or a 5-year project, depending on what your debt service extension base looks like. And it escalates with CPI, depending on what your EAD looks like, so that can fluctuate. And in talking to some of the financial advisors with PMA, who's one of the big...
That's what you're using?
We are using PMA. They said that was the most complicated of the 3 options, and it did not have a good success ratio, and the DSEB is so fluid with different districts that it was, to bring it down into some manageable pieces, it was limiting rate and then the issuing the bonds.
So you never, did we do QSCD or anything?
We did not do qualified school bonds. We did not. They did not do those. I don't know why. I'm in like 116. But yeah, the QSEB bonds or the Build America bonds, you had to have some very specific criteria with your school in order to even be eligible to issue those bonds. But the bonding capacity, I would guess that because it's locally funded and low income's very low, but not for sure. But
Terry,
yeah,
I think, let's see if there's some other questions here. Maybe we can, because we could talk about the details, and get real deep with business managers. So I want to make sure we're answering general questions too, if we can get a chance. Other questions or thoughts? Otherwise, we'll go back and get more technical even. Yes.
Completely different topic.
Of course.
Much simpler. One, phone survey, really? I mean, no one's going to answer a phone if they don't know the number. Just an observation.
Yeah. Frankly, the company
you know,
said that
I
they're
think
struggling with
there
that.
might be another way to achieve that, but that's just an observation. And then,
Let me address that real quick, just for the sake of everybody. Okay, this is a firm that does this as a profession, and so they're the ones that have guaranteed that we're going to get some statistically significant results, and so that's on them to bring this back to us. They know that everywhere it's an environment that it's difficult to get people on the phone these days. And so they know that's the hurdle that they have to accomplish. And so, but we wanted really concrete and accurate data. That's why we employed them to actually do this for us. And we talked about that at length, yes.
Yeah, I disagree, but that's not the point.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to know about your architect selection. Is that going to be criteria for that? Is that going to be discussed at all?
Not this evening, no. It's a team that's going through the process. We're a team interviewed. There's a specific process we need to follow to select an architect. We're following that per school code and all of the rules. And so eventually that team then, through me, will make a recommendation to the board of the final candidate that comes out of it. I can say this with compliments to this community, there was a lot of interest in this district. Obviously, we have projects that are on the horizon. So we had 13 really highly qualified firms that submitted proposals, and we interviewed 5 today. We were able to narrow it down to 5. We're going to 3, and then we'll eventually end up with 1 that we'll make the recommendation to the board on.
Thank you, it's really helpful.
Yes, of course. Yes, sir.
First, I give an observation as far as the home survey. If I see FACO come across on my phone, that does not inspire confidence. I'm probably not going to pick it up.
I don't know if they'll do caller ID that says Mokena School District. I don't know if they can do that. Yeah.
But, like I said, FACO is probably not the best thing. The difference between the bond, other than the interest, and the limited rate, there seems to be a time frame issue. With a bond, there's a time frame where the bond ends.
Yes,
The limited rate, there is no time frame.
correct,
So once you pass it, it stays forever.
correct. The board, the district could abate, or they could not, basically not collect, right? They could choose to do that, but you're absolutely right, that this would continue.
Is there any way of making the limited rate have a time frame?
Not that I'm familiar with. Terry, are you familiar with any mechanisms?
It increases your limit for your tax cap. The only way that that goes down is if when the district doesn't levy as much the next year, what you start with is what is the base for the limiting rate. So if the board chooses not to levy for the maximum and they levy or abate for less, that decrease is also permanent. So it could be ratcheted down through the process.
Yeah. That's
And as
correct.
far as the money collected, is it only for capital projects? Or will it always be for capital projects?
I can tell you that at this moment, it's for capital projects, but in the future, I can't make promises that I can't control, nor this board can control.
Okay,
So it
could
gives
be
you
used for other
flexibility.
things in the future.
I'm sorry?
It could be used for
That
other.
if the district, if the board chose to do it that way, that's correct. Yes. Mhm. Good question. Other questions or ideas? Yes, sir.
There's been, I think, 3 referendums that attempted in the past decade maybe. Did the board figure out why those didn't pass and what would be different this time?
I have not figured out why they didn't pass. We have some assumptions as to why it didn't pass, and we're approaching this differently than that.
Question?
Yeah, yes, the
sorry.
question was, did the board figure out why the previous 3 referendums, or whatever number it has been, did not pass? That was the question.
In the last decade. So we have sought feedback from the community as to why they did or did not vote to pass the referendum. We are approaching it differently. This is not an operations referendum. This is a capital improvement to maintain and not build buildings or run our schools. It's to maintain our buildings, which is different. It's a different, at this point, we're not sure, but we're looking at a different type, not a bond sale, which is different than last time. We're looking at a maintenance of our tax rate as opposed to an increase. So there are different circumstances this time than in the past decade. I don't know if anybody else can speak to that. Anna, you were around for the last referendum.
People just, I don't know. I don't think we got the message out there clear enough to begin with, I guess. And so people didn't understand. Everybody just assumed we were going to be raising everyone's taxes. That's the only thing I can think of. I can tell you, being on that last 2 referendum tries, we didn't get any of this kind of information, even as we were walking around trying to talk to, the community.
One of the main things I think is different is the referendum came out as a referendum, and we have not voted as a board to even put this question on the ballot yet. We are seeking community input before we even vote to put it on the ballot. So I think that it had already been on the ballot when people were getting the information and trying to seek the approval of the community. And so that's why we are trying to find other solutions to our challenges. So this is not only just talking about our possible referendum, but if not referendum, then what? Then what do we do? People have great ideas. This is another opportunity for very intelligent, like-minded people to think about how we can then continue to maintain these buildings. They are safe, they are secure, but we need conducive learning environments. So we are absolutely open to other feedback, if not a referendum.
Yes, sir.
So this is a perfect segue. I was going to ask this right away. Who on the board, I mean, is everybody that's on the board behind this right now? Is there any, let me just rephrase the question. Is there anyone on the board that isn't for this?
I'm in favor of putting a referendum on the ballot in April of 2019.
The board,
I can't speak for everybody.
yeah, I don't, the board hasn't really engaged in, is everyone on board? We had a special meeting where we discussed keeping this moving forward. But the board is genuinely interested in getting this input, and there may be board members, frankly, that are still making up their mind, and I respect that completely. So I can't speak for them as individuals, but I do know that they have a genuine interest in hearing what you're saying about pros and cons, is this the right time, all those things.
So I'm really ignorant on this. So let's say the majority of the board is not behind this, but the backleg work that you did shows that there's genuine interest from the community.
Yeah.
Does it get put on the ballot?
No, the board is the entity that has to vote to place it on the ballot. However, there's obviously a political process then. If the community was in conflict with the board, you would want to, maybe through me, share information, and I'll make sure that the board has it. But there's a process that you would go through to have these kinds of conversations. There's public comment at each of our board meetings, so you could come and speak your mind. That's why we're collecting the data now, and I believe the board's going to listen to the community.
So we could ultimately spend all this money on data mining, but the board shoot it down.
That's always a possibility, yes.
I think I'd like to just make a comment. I've had the privilege of living in Mokena for over 40 years, and my two kids went through the Mokena system and graduated from Lincoln. But I don't ever recall any board, park, school, village having this number of planned community forums to gather that input. And the forums to gather the input are to, number one, get a pulse of the community. And number two, to then, for the board to analyze and say, hey, man, the community's in favor of this. And so as we deliberate in our infinite wisdom, we have that understanding. And so, again, I'm going to say this is unprecedented in the 40 years that I've been privileged to live in Mokena.
Yes, sir.
I'll say one of the, when the last board, or the last referendum was held, to me personally, I think it was 100% timing. People were just trying to be happy they had a job without worried about raising taxes. If a referendum is going to pass, I would think now is the time, and I think the big headwind would be with new administration coming out of the state. They plan on raising taxes, which is, I know you mentioned the possible property tax freeze. I've heard quite the opposite of this. So I think there's a tiny window because the park district got a dog park and splash pad passed through like that. And they went as soon as the economy was picking up, people felt good, and the school district went for the referendum and people were just praying they had a job.
Sure. Yes, sir.
I just want to say before I leave that I hope you do put it on the ballot. I think it's important. This school district, the community's only as good as the schools, and if people have a problem with it, it's bigger than you guys. It's not your fault that the state of Illinois funds schools the way they do. That's the state legislators, Congress, the House, and the Senate. We need to lobby them to adequately fund schools. You have great principals here. My kids were in every school. Like I said, Dr. Leonidas is a great guy. You have great teachers. They need to be paid. Because once the schools go down, we're in direct competition with Frankfurt and New Lenox. We're going to lose everything. And again, if people can't see this, just comparing your tax rate, if you have a problem with it, go to your state senator and go to your house and start lobbying them to start funding schools adequately in Illinois. Mokena should not be penalized for being in this middle of the road, not poor, not rich. It's unfair. And I hope everybody listens I've been a superintendent for 12 years. I was a business manager before that. I've seen a lot. And if we want to secure these schools, we need a referendum. We need to raise our rate above the 289. That's my personal opinion. And we need to hit our state legislators harder and make sure that they don't forget about communities like Mokena. Because the perception is Mokena's doing well. That's not the case. They want to take care of everyone else. And I'm glad they take care of Chicago Heights, because that's where I work. We're 100% low-income community, but the state needs to fund these schools as well. And I hope everybody can get on board with it.
Thank you. Sir, do you have another question?
Yeah, I said, how strong are current funds? Because, you know, the economy's coming along. I go to a lot of economists' conferences, and I mean, there's going to be another recession probably late 1920s, what they're all saying. So if the EAB starts dropping again, say for the next 5 years, will our current funds be strong enough where a referendum will not, an additional referendum will not be needed to boost that money coming in the door?
Terry, do you have a thought on that?
Sure. So we're talking about, just to be clear, what is the impact of a declining EAB
Right.
on this particular referendum, right?
Well,
Is that what you're asking?
say like in 3-4 years, we have another great recession, and you know the assessor does his job of saying your $300,000 house is now $250,000. You're going to get less money unless you start increasing the rate. So our current funds strong enough to withstand that, say like in 5 years, if it kind of takes them. So not passing another referendum on top of this.
This district went through that, as did all school districts went through that, so they went through that period of a 5-year declining EAB. And what happens is your EAB goes down, you still need this same kind of extension, and the extension is about the dollars. So you issue that same extension, and your tax rate actually increases proportionately to the EAB going down, because it's math. Tax rate times EAB equals extension.
Okay.
And so in a tax cap county, you don't get to just increase your extension. You can increase, the math is a little backwards. It's all about the tax rate. So the tax rate is capped. So that's the limiting rate. That's why we talk about the limiting rate. So your rate doesn't get to just keep going up when your EAB goes down. So you get capped. So the district does have fund balances in reserve to be able to withstand an economic downturn. Because the economic downturn, and also as your EAB goes down, your state funding also goes up. There's a little bit of a lag behind that state funding, but your state funding also increases as your local capacity decreases. So there's a couple different scenarios for that. So my long answer to your question is no. From my perspective, the district would not seek another referendum if it had a downturn in the economy.
Yes, sir.
Currently, do we budget maintenance right now in the school budget?
Yes, we have some funds that we do budget for maintenance. And Terry, do you want to speak to that also?
Sure. So we levy, so when you've got schools operate under what's called fund accounting. So we have different silos when we make a levy. So much of our levy goes into the education fund, so much of it goes into the operation and maintenance fund, so much of it goes in the transportation fund. And those are the major funds. So the money that we levy for that goes into the operations and maintenance funds, we use that money to pay for operations and maintenance. Does that answer that question?
Okay, so if we do add the 30 cents, would that change how things are levied? Or is the entire 30 cents going to go into the building fund?
Well, at this point in time, the plan for right now is that the entire 30 cents is going to go into the building fund to take care of repairs, maintenance, and updates to the school buildings. That is the current plan, is that all of that 30 cents goes to that purpose.
So it impacts the levy on that, whatever that generates, the 30 cents, goes
So it's
into
gonna be
operation and
whatever
maintenance.
Whatever we've already put in there plus the 30 cents.
Correct, yes.
Is that levy?
Yes, because right now, we don't have enough to cover these projects that you've seen on your screen, the bigger projects.
Right.
Yeah.
So 10 years down the road when the projects are over, then we could reallocate that to other levies.
Technically, yes, you can do that. That's correct, you can.
Or you can abate.
or you can abate. I mean, there's several options before the board at that time, 10 years. But I guess I would look at it as, we know there's continuous. We have a 20-year plan right now of facility improvements. So that's reaching out pretty far. And then you're almost repeating that again when you get out that far. So you're almost always going to need some amount greater than we have right now to cover these projects.
Terry, who makes the determination of where the funds go? Is that the board?
Yes.
Okay. I'm just clarifying.
We
Yeah,
have
they-
a conversation about it, and we see a levy, and we have the tentative levy, which is tonight, and I make a recommendation to you for, here's the levy amounts, and here are the funds that we're gonna put the money in, and then it's on display for everybody to see, and then we have a truth and taxation hearing, which talks about the levy and the money that goes into the different funds, and then you approve it in December.
So the recommendation comes from administration,
It does.
and we approve it,
It does.
or ask questions.
Did you hear that? The recommendation for the levy comes through the administration to the board approves it then. And we're in that cycle right now. Tonight will be a tentative levy that's put on public display if the board so chooses. I hope they do, because we have to be on display. And then from there, they'll approve it next, or in December, when we come back as a board. I thought I had seen one other hand, perhaps? Yes, ma'am.
I was just going to ask, when will you have a finite number for all these projects, or will there be something that will show, here is what we're going to be spending?
Yeah. It won't be, I can almost guarantee you, it won't be before the April 2nd election. The architects are going to start almost immediately, but they need to define the projects, make sure we've got the right definition, validate the projects. Then they've got to go through the estimation project or process. And when that happens, then we'll be able to put information out. So it's going to take a period of time. I would love to say,
This is on the ballot.
well, we know the general sense of what we need in revenue to cover these projects over the scope of the years. I just can't tell you that the HVAC is going to be exactly this, or that the replacement of some floors that we need to do is going to be exactly this. I want to give you those details. We just don't have them at this point. Terry?
We do have the high-level look, and we do have the McKinsey report, which gives us a range, the short-term, mid-term, and long-term range. So we know approximately what the cost of those projects are going to be, but there are so many moving parts and factors that we have a high-level look, and we've got a broad range.
Yeah, that's what my concern was. It looked like a pretty large range.
It is, and it's because they haven't opened the door, so to speak, and really gotten in details to find out what's underneath of that we don't know yet. Because you tear into a wall in your house, if it's got any age on it, there's something behind there that you didn't expect.
Has the board considered thinking outside of just maintaining the facilities and thinking about down the road and 21st century learning and expanding them to be more collaborative for our students, so that, we're putting the money in it now so that down the road we are more equipped and more prepared? Has that been some of the conversations, or considered increasing the work class in effort to do that for our students?
Go ahead, Jen.
Do I always? I would say yes, we have considered that. We have not talked about increasing the rate to this point. This is the first community forum. Dr. White and I have attended numerous school meetings and the village meeting to get seeking feedback on our request as it stands to maintain our tax rate. So I am delighted to hear at least 3 people in this room say that it might behoove us to actually ask for more money, given our situation. But yes, 21st century learning is at the top of the minds of, I think I can speak for all of our board members. We want to impact the learning of children in our district. That is our number one priority. And we think we can do that through some of those, through a 21st century classroom. But at this point, we're looking at patching roofs and sinkholes on playgrounds.
When you
So
see
that's
them-
what
Sorry, Jen.
our number one concern is at this
When
point.
you look at the McKinstry report, you'll see there are some line items in there for that specific thing. That it's kind of, I wouldn't say it's way out there as far as expense goes, but there is some already embedded in this conversation. Terry?
So to talk about the 21st century classrooms and that is part of it as we get there. And you've heard HVAC a lot, so the HVAC systems. So when we talk about updating and replacing the HVAC systems, it is the HVAC system, but the end of it is that it's going to create a better learning environment. It's going to create a better room and a better feel and a better environment for the kids. And when they have that, that's going to have a positive impact on teaching and learning. So it'll have a positive impact on student achievement, which is a bigger picture than just replacing the HVAC.
And also, as you replace those, they're much more efficient today, so you realize savings that can then be turned around to these kinds of conversations. Anything else? Yes, sir.
The current governor-elect has talked a lot about changing the state income tax to help the schools. Have any thought be given to this plan if he does manage to do that? And the income tax gets degraduated, and we've already passed this, what would happen?
The board could determine if they're going to levy the full amount. I mean, that's an option for the board to consider. I haven't seen the specific plans of what the governor-elect is looking at or how it would impact us, if at all. So it's a little bit hypothetical at this moment to try to surmise what might happen.
I would just say that we get zero funding from income tax at the moment. I mean, it's property taxes and from the state. So whatever he has on his agenda, I've not heard about it. So we can always speculate what it might be, but at this point in time, we get nothing. So it'd be kind of, I don't know the details of the plan. So if you know the details of the plan, I'd love to hear them.
I don't, I've just seen some articles.
But income tax.
All they're talking about is charging us more, not what we're gonna get out of it.
It's like the lottery money.
Yes, but income taxes right now, we get nothing. So if you look at, our funding and our budget, I mean, you can see what Dr. White showed up there. It's property taxes, it's state and federal aid, nothing from income tax. So that would be accretive, I guess, if we got anything.
Okay, if you don't mind, if you have additional questions or you want me to contact you, don't forget there's cards back here. You can give them to me or to anyone in the room up here, and then they'll make sure they get them to me. We're willing to answer questions and accept additional input. Those questions will start developing a frequently asked question list and hopefully continue this journey in a conversation with our community. Board President, any final comments or anything you'd like to wrap it up?
The board plans to vote by January 14th. That doesn't mean our vote will be on January 14th. After that point in time, administrators and board members can only share the facts of our situation. So if you want to meet with any of us and the superintendent, we're happy to do that. But we can only share the facts after that point. So I can't give you my opinion or those types of things, or any of us can't. So that's just an important note.
Yes.
One point I'd like to make is one of the things our Mokena residents are trusting us to do is be good stewards of your money. I don't think anybody takes that lightly. Evidenced by the fact we're not asking for anything really extra. We're asking to continue the tax payments, quite honestly, without interest. We're not building a building, that's why we're not asking for the bond money. We don't need it all right now. But we do want to maintain good learning environments for our kids. And if the schools suffer, quite honestly, the community's going to suffer. But that's one of the reasons I got involved in this. The school was suffering, and I didn't like it, and I tried to get involved to try to help. We're not asking to build anything special. We're trying to be good stewards of what you're trusting us to do. And I'd like to showcase what we've done with that trust. We've done a pretty good job. And no matter what the state does, we are still going to try to do a great job for our kids. And if you don't trust us with that, we shouldn't be sitting here. But we care enough to try to put our time in to help our community. And part of that is trusting us with tax dollars. We try to do a great job with that, and I hope you recognize that tonight. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I'd just like to say thank you to you and to the leadership of the board for taking the time to do this community forum. Speaking as somebody who worked towards trying to pass the referendum the last few times, we did not have this. And so I think this level of transparency speaks volumes to me as a taxpayer, to me as a parent, and hopefully to the rest of the community And so I thank you for that. And the 289, to me, this is a no-brainer. This is a no-brainer that we just continue where we're at, and that money maintains our buildings. I would even say that I would hope to see us consider, or see the board consider, even asking for more, as a few other people have mentioned, so that we can update to 21st century learning across all of our school buildings.
One additional comment, if you don't mind, real quick, and that is, thank you, everyone, for coming this evening. But there are a lot of people in the community that don't have a connection to the schools, children in the schools, or they aren't invested in schools. Please, if you have neighbors that have questions, point them our direction. We would love to have that conversation too, because it's a great majority of our families or taxpayers who don't see the schools in operation on a regular basis. They see the buses go up and down, so they know we're still operating. But outside of that, they don't have a real connection with the schools, and we want them to hear this story also.
Okay, we will continue our open meeting. Having no more questions, or having questions and wanting to fill them or send them to Dr. White at any other time, I welcome you to stay to hear our board meeting. I would love to have a full audience, but I want you also to feel very welcome to leave if you like. And throughout the meeting, if you stay for another 15 or 20 minutes, you can feel free to get up at any time. People do it all the time.
Madam President, I'd like to make a motion that we recess for 10 minutes.
Okay, the motion has been put on the floor
So
to
moved.
recess for 10 minutes. Do I have a second?
Yep.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? We will recess for 10 minutes to reconvene in this room at 8:20.